Okay, hi everybody to our second webinar on EUKI public relation. Before Isabella Sobieski starts her presentation on writing storytelling for social media platforms, I would like to ask you who you are and in which project you are working. Last Monday, some of you already had the chance to introduce themselves and their project. Today, I want to ask, is there anybody here for the first time? Please feel free to introduce yourself and your project. Anyone new here or?
I'm here, I'm new.
Okay. Hello.
Hi, I'm Kasia from WWF Poland. Actually, right now from my house, so
Yes, as we all
it's great
probably.
to see you and hear.
Yeah, I don't have my video because of the bad internet. I'm also at home and my internet connection is very slow and very bad, so that's why I'm only with my picture. But Kasia, you're from Poland and you're the spokespeople of WWF in Poland, is that
Yes,
right?
I work in WWF and I also worked in EUKI 1 project. I was the communicator in EUKI 1. Right now I'm off EUKI 2, but I'm very into climate discussions and climate communication in my foundation because we do a lot of projects about climate. So it's great for me to listen how you want to communicate the EUKI topics also in social media. And thank you for having this seminar.
Yes, thank you. And you will have your own presentations in the following weeks. Do you remember what time, what date it will be? Which Monday?
I'm not sure because my colleague Ola took this case, so I will ask her today.
Okay,
How
we
she's
will
doing
see.
with the
But one of the
project.
next Mondays, Kasia will talk about her experiences in Poland and her experience with press, with media, and how to get in contact with media people and to take advantage of it. Okay, thank you. Anybody else who is new and would like to introduce him or herself and his project?
Okay, hello, can you hear me well?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Yes, hello, my name is Isabella Sobieski. I'm from Poland, from Association of Municipalities Polish Network ENERGYCTA. I was here last week, but I had a bad connection, so I couldn't introduce myself. But let me say a few words about my project. I'm here because I'm working on GRAD project, which main goal is to promote green roofs and living walls as a tool for climate change adaptation of urban areas. Including the initiation of development of model green roof strategies in 8 Polish municipalities. So we also want to raise public understanding of local vulnerability to climate change and benefits of setting up green roofs. So yeah, it was about the project. So thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Isam. Who else? Okay, Nina. You just wrote something that you're new, Nina.
Yeah, I can shortly say something. If
Okay,
you hear
cool.
me. Do you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a project called Paludiculture in the Baltics. Paludiculture is a noun from paludi. It's from Palus, Latin, the peatland or the Maya and culture in terms of agriculture. Sense is to combine the two words in using peatlands in form of alternative agriculture and not as they are used right now. Most of the peatlands are used drained, and due to drainage, these organic soils are emitting a huge amount of carbon dioxide. If they are revetted, they store the carbon in the soil, and we have a benefit for the climate. In addition, if we use peatlands wet, we can grow, for example, reed or typha and make things out of it. So we grow a new form of biomass, and we have to use it as a renewable resource. So we have two benefits, or three, because revetting is avoiding final loss of land, which we would have if we would continue drained agriculture, so agriculture on drained soils. That's what we are working on, and in this project we are working on paludiculture in the Baltic states. And I'm doing communications for the Greifswald Maya Center and the Zucker Foundation in combination for all kinds of projects.
Okay, Nina, thank you very much.
Yeah. Welcome.
And Raluca also is new. Do you hear us? Yes, we hear you. Could you please introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm glad to meet everyone. It's for the first time in this webinar. I joined Bankwatch Romania in February as a communication coordinator, so this discussion will be very useful for me. And Bankwatch Romania, it's mostly working on energy projects. Right now we are focusing on coal phase-out, coal power plants monitoring, just transition. We have a few regions in Romania that will access EU money for just transition, and energy transformation.
Okay, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed the webinars. And I didn't forget Makela, but she wrote that she had no microphone, so we can't hear her, but she wrote something in the comment box. And I would like to ask you too, if you have any comment or any question or any, let's say, problem which rises technically, just feel free and write it in the comment box. We will always look at it and try to answer your questions and your comments. And now I'm very happy to welcome Isabella, a warm welcome, Isabella. Thank you so much for jumping in. Yeah, now I would like to hand over the microphone to you.
Yes, thank you. Can everybody hear me? Or you can actually answer that, maybe, Oliver, because your internet connection is worse than others, maybe.
Mine is worst.
Yeah, so maybe if you can hear me, that means that everybody can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you very well. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, yeah, very happy to be here. I did do a similar presentation last year for EUKI, and it was a lot of fun, and I really enjoyed it. Learn a lot about climate, but looking through, like, hearing everybody's projects now, I think I have so much to learn. It's one of the fields that is constantly, of course, growing and changing, and yeah, so it's very interesting. I think that I'm gonna just tell you shortly about myself, and then I think we go into, like, trying to share my screen. We had some technical difficulties, so I hope that it will work, so that you can all see the presentation that I have prepared. But about me, so my name is Isabella Sobieski. For all the Polish people, which is always really nice to see Polish people on the call. My father is from Poland, but I was born in Sweden to a Finnish mother. Grew up in Sweden, bilingual, and yeah, moved around a little bit. Ended up in Berlin 8 years ago. have worked in the entertainment business for a really long time now, but also done a lot of brand and marketing and communications for startups, which I will tell you a little bit more about when I start my presentation. But yeah, so basically I'm familiar with European countries and especially with Poland, and coming from Sweden, of course, like I grew up with like being very aware of climate, and then growing up half in Poland, I was also very aware of those things. And in combination with my marketing and brand background, I think that I can perhaps give you a couple of pointers in how to work with consumers, or local media, or use social media, and how to use it, how to simplify it, how to structure messaging, and get the important messages of your projects out there, more or less. So as I said, I've worked 10 plus years, so almost actually going on 15 now, within the entertainment industry, doing everything from advertising, marketing, branding, and so on. I currently work for Spotify, where I've been doing a lot of projects around German music, mainly hip hop, and finding ways to communicate to different types of consumers about German hip hop. So that is one project that I did, but I also did a lot of other projects within Spotify. Very cool to work with Spotify. It's a fast growing company. They, of course, face a lot of different challenges, and they have to see to a lot of different types of consumers, because it's both younger people, older people, people who like different types of music. So yeah, it's just always a very interesting challenge to take on, because you have to try to understand in every aspect of your work who you actually want to talk to and who you want to address, and how you do it the best way possible. I worked for MTV, I worked for Nickelodeon, I worked with startups, I worked with Infarm, which is one of the world's leading hydroponic companies. So they do urban, like indoor farming, but they are the only company that actually place their hydroponic farms within supermarkets. They've grown expansionally. They've opened up in the US, in the UK. They are opening up in Japan now. And in times of this, of course, Infarm is a leading company because it's locally produced. It's just produced with water. It's completely sustainable. It's 100% natural products. I was there and launched their expansion in Europe, and help them out with creating websites and communication plans for their social media, especially focusing on Instagram and newsletters, etc. I launched Nickelodeon actually in Poland as a dedicated TV channel a couple of years ago. Within a year, we made it into #1. The strategy that we used in Poland.
Sorry.
Oh, okay. So the strategy, like Nickelodeon is, for those who doesn't know, it's a kids TV channel. What we did in Poland that was very unique for a TV channel especially was that we only worked digitally to try to find the kids and the parents and talk to them about us being in Poland. And this worked out really well. So within a year, we were actually the #1 channel in Poland. And the one thing that we used there was only to have fun and in a creative way, just reach the kids and gain the trust from the parents, even though sometimes there's some reluctancy in American brands, but in Poland and in this sense, it really worked out. So we did a lot of research and a lot of work before we implemented the strategy for a rollout. And we depended a lot on social media, a lot on different types of games that we could target, different types of strategies that we did from a weekly, monthly, or even like on a yearly basis. So that's a little bit about my job. And now, so this is mainly, I know that this is a PR seminar, And since, you know, you all work in very important matters, but they differ a lot, I wanted to talk about three different types of things, actually. So I'm going to talk about storytelling and how storytelling is important in business, because even if you do projects that are, for example, sometimes pro bono, or projects that reach out to consumers, it's still a business for you. It's a job, and you need to do the job, and you want to get it out, because at the end, the goal is that you reach your goal of like improving the climate or enabling solutions in order for the climate to be better. So I want to show you this little video and to know how storytelling is important. And with storytelling, I mean, I think that everybody knows what storytelling is, but I think that sometimes we tend to forget. And we tend to forget that everything that we do, even if it's a job, is actually a story. But sometimes we get so caught up that we forget to tell the story. So we just present the facts. And we think that this is sufficient. But if we don't include the story, then we don't create attention. So this is what I'm going to talk a little bit about. So let's try to see if I can play this video. So I'm just going to continue now and go back into this presentation mode. It's so confusing with this. I have to go back and forth. So anyhow, so I think that this little video explains very well how the landscape, especially amongst like, it doesn't have to be only consumers, it's also businesses. And one of the like things that we always talk about nowadays is like that there's so much noise. There's a lot of noise everywhere where, you know, where you're presented with some kind of like input. So you as a person, as a normal consuming person of internet, of any kind of things that you actually like, if it's artists on Facebook, or if you follow politicians on Twitter, or if you watch the news, or if you have a favorite author, like all of these people communicate to you via different platforms in different times of the day, and they all sometimes do it simultaneously. So this, of course, for you, if you want to get your message through, if it's like work related, or even if you want to get a message through to even like your friend or partner or someone else, you have to get their attention. So with this video, what I think is like pretty good is that, you know, sometimes like we have facts, but stories are not facts. The stories actually present facts. So we need facts in order to create stories. Once we have, you know, the story presenting the facts, we can give facts a purpose. And once we have given the facts in a story a purpose, we can get the story's attention. And the attention part is where we can get the hooks. And nowadays, when we talk about the noise, it's because we're so fueled by so many channels and so many things that is going around us, even in, as I said, in work life or in business, that the attention span is becoming lower and lower. So, or like less and less. So fewer and fewer seconds. And this is a normal behavior for us today. So there's only a certain amount that we can actually digest as consumers in general. And when it comes to businesses, this is of course then very hard to understand. How do we communicate in all these different platforms? How can we even create these stories that would maybe hit a percentage of the people that we want to get interested? And it's not, I think that nowadays when you are, especially if you work on projects or if you're a smaller business, I think that consistency is the key, but you also need to have patience. And patience is something that it doesn't like, you don't generate likes or, you know, like retweets and stuff like that on social media immediately. Because if there's so much noise, how can you actually, like, how do you create a strategy in order to find, you know, to find where your attention lies? And this takes me to the next slide. So the job is always to tell a story. So in the beginning of this presentation, you shared your project descriptions with us because Oliver asked you, like, is there someone here that is new? And you all said, well, this is my first webinar. I work in this and that, and this is my project. Some of the projects I can understand. Some of it is new to me because I don't work within the climate sector or market. So, but it doesn't really matter because like your job is to tell the story. The story is something that you take with you everywhere. So if I have a job and my friend asked me, like, what do you do for a living? I need to be able to tell her that, like, well, I'm a brand and marketing expert, or I'm a brand and marketing professional. And this is and then I tell my story the same way that I shared your story. And the same way I share my stories with all kinds of projects that I do, because there's always something that there's always something to tell. And it doesn't matter what kind of profession you are. If you're a scientist, if you're a developer, if you're a designer, it doesn't really matter because your job will always be your story. So anyhow, so I was talking to summarize what I've said so far. We were talking about storytelling and we were talking about how important it is to realize that our job is basically to tell stories. And nowadays we have so many platforms and so much noise out there that we really have to understand how we can create attention and then how we can revoke reaction. Because once we revoke reaction, then we can, of course, like they go hand in hand, the attention and reaction. And this, it's interest. So the thing is that in all of this is that the context is key. Once we have a story, we can actually find opportunities for this story to live on in different types of way on different types of platforms. But all the platforms are different. So people like use Instagram different than Facebook or Twitter. So Instagram is picture-based. Facebook is about community or sharing or following. And Twitter is about messaging. It's mainly text-driven and it's a lot of mainly more like a news platform nowadays. And at the same way that we act differently in different situations. So if we go into a board meeting, we act in a certain way, or if we meet a friend, or if we hang out with a partner, we are a little bit different because we have different relationships to these people. So we need to, like, even if we present ourselves, we do it in different types of way. And it's the exact same thing online. So you have to find a tone of voice that is adjustable to the media. So for example, Instagram is much more personal because Instagram is mobile. And it became so popular because people actually thought that at Instagram, my friends and me, we are talking only to each other. Like it's much more personal. It's something because I hold the mobile in my hand. And Facebook, for example, it came as a desktop. So it was something that we did on our computer. So the behavior there is different. And even if we have Facebook on our mobiles now, it's a completely different way to find information. On Instagram, we share personal stories and we tag each other and they're very short. And on Facebook, we might read articles and share them, but it's a different behavior. And the same thing with Twitter and the same thing with newsletters that we get in our emails. So there's certain things today that speak only to us as individual consumers, and then other things that speak to a group. So it's very important to understand how do you actually separate all these channels online, and how can you use the same context that you have, but spread it in a very smart way so that you basically don't have to double the work, because you can just use the same core message but in a different way, like on the platforms. And this could mean just changing a picture, because that's all it is. So going further, I always share this with people. I mean, probably some of you, because you work in communications and PR and you're not unfamiliar with this, but coming from an entertainment background where my profession is that I work a lot with consumer-facing things, I always need to be structured, always. In any kind of messaging, I've worked on projects where 8 countries are involved, you know, and the same content goes out, but it has different languages. And we always need to figure out how to find the right structure. Early in my career, when I was still working in advertising and I was a copywriter, I learned about the magic number 3. And it's a simple formula, but for me, it has really, really worked. And I love this formula. I also shared it with the people from last year, and there were some people also like finding it really helpful because it does bring a structure. A simple formula in order to break down any kind of case could just be, you know, if you have a project, for example, you always have an introduction, which is the purpose or the background. The introduction is the purpose. The background is usually the explanation. So you explain what the project is about, and the ending is a summary. And this is very simple. It's like the beginning, the middle, and the end. And that's actually all you need to know, because every story has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And if there's too much in between, or if you put the middle in the beginning and the beginning in the middle, then you might already have lost the reader, because then the reader doesn't really understand. And then the reader needs to go back from the middle to the or from the beginning to the middle, or the middle to the beginning, you know what I mean? So it can get very confusing. And sometimes in our own head, if we don't ask ourselves certain questions, we might lose this. Because for us in our job, if we have a project that we're working on, maybe we've worked on it for X amount of months, right? So we have a project plan in place, we have a project description, we have collected all kinds of information, we've done a PowerPoint presentation, we presented the project internally, and we've got a green light that now we need to get moving, right? But then the project is already so much in our head that we know everything about the project. So maybe when we are going then to a third-party user or a third-party organization, or if you go out to municipalities, or if you go out to schools, then all of a sudden you need to introduce this project again. And then the question is like, do you do it the way that you have gotten to know the project, or do you ask yourself some questions so that you can explain like the essential part of your project for that other person to easily understand it? And if it comes back to storytelling, it could be as simple as questions like, why must you tell this story? What's the belief burning within you that your story feeds off of? What's the greater purpose that this serves, and what does it teach? So once you start formulating and structuring your project in order to present it to the outside world, then this of course also changes from how you present it internally. And the 3 is a magic number. The rule of 3 is very simple, because it's the smallest number we need to create a pattern to perfect a combination of brevity and rhythm. And I don't know how many of you know the rule of 3, but if you don't know it, I believe that from now on, you will definitely see that a lot of businesses, a lot of brands use this as a marketing tool. It also takes advantage of our inherent nature to produce communications that are simple, appealing, and effective. And this can even be translated into headlines. So instead of maybe just doing a headline that is very long to describe something, you actually divide it into 3 parts. So you said you take something interesting from the project and you put it on top, and you use 3 examples, you know, climate project, 1, 2, 3, this is whatever. It's hard for me to come up with an example, but it's a very easy way for the brain to understand how to or to get attention, and also an easier way to revoke reaction. Because for me as a reader, or as a person who wants to know something, my brain is already trained to understand this pattern. And it's the pattern that I can take in a very fast way. And that's why everybody uses it. And also the grouping business priorities into 3 areas not only increases recall, it also forces you to prioritize. And one of the things that I've learned, especially when you do project or you do even PowerPoint presentations, that using 3 always, like as a pattern, as examples, it really brings a structure into something that might seem very complex. Anyhow, so going further into this, so if we are talking about the rule of 3 and storytelling and how we can use it, and in the world today where we face a lot of noise and we have a lot of different platforms, how do we simplify? How can we just, for example, use headlines? Because headlines is something that, you know, on Instagram, headlines are very important because, and even on Facebook, if you use Facebook and you want to, for example, advertise on Facebook, they even have a rule that you cannot use any text in the picture. So there's a 20% text rule. So if you even try to sponsor ads on Facebook, if your ad has long explanations to it, it doesn't go through the system. Because pictures for these channels, they say more than 1,000 words, which also means because these platforms, they know the users and they know how they want their platform to be used. So the thing right here is that how do you break down a story that in your world seems to be very complex, but you can always take story and break it down because it's already a full project that has little bits and pieces that are interesting. And especially, you have the option to learn more. So if you use Facebook, for example, you don't need to write out the entire project description at one go. You can write out an essential part, and then you can tell the reader to learn more by clicking and being redirected to a website, for example. Or another thing, it could be redirected to sign up for a newsletter. So nowadays, there's a lot of different little things that can be used in order for something to seem like that we see as very complex because it's a big project, and we try to understand, okay, so how do we break this down? We would want to use social media, but how can we promote this on social media? And sometimes it's just actually being able to look at it from a different perspective and seeing like, okay, so in this one big story, there's actually 5 little stories, right? And these little stories, if we have different pictures to them and different headlines, we can use them on Instagram, on Twitter, on blogs. We can even use them in newsletters. We can create info videos. We can post info videos on YouTube or LinkedIn. We can also use podcasts. And we could also use downloadable white papers, which is also very popular nowadays, especially when it comes to people who want to learn.
Could you explain what is a downloadable white paper?
So in a sponsored ad, for example, if it's a newsletter or if it's on Facebook, you actually just share part of the project description and then you say to the person that you can click here to download the full project, like the full white paper, which is called, it's like an informative paper. And then you can download it by just putting in your email, for example. And once you put in your email, then you can have access to this person's email. And in that way, you kind of can build a base of interested people in your project. There's with white papers, the good thing is that there's different types of it. So you don't need to share a 24 slides project like a white paper. You can also just do infographics and share maybe 3 slides, and this can still be very attractive. So there's different ways to go around it. And if you do it, you can also have people, for example, immediately consenting you to access to their email address, which also means that you can direct them again with other types of white papers. So it's a way, kind of like a newsletter, but a little bit more educational. So in this sense, when you do a lot of attention around a very important topic, this could be a good way to get the message out there. And MailChimp is also like, it's for free. And if you have all of this, then you can, and the good thing about MailChimp, of course, is that you have all the analysis. So you can also track how many people open what type of content and everything. And if you can track that and you can learn, then you can also understand what content is performing the best. Yes, and this is of course really important, because all these channels that you're using, you can you just break down all kinds of news that you have, and basically you can use like the one project that you have, you can use for like, if it goes on for years, you can use the same content for years. The only thing you need to do is change the picture and add another headline, and then you still have something that is attractive. Because some of the people that are actually subscribing to these newsletters, they might not remember what actually was in there from the beginning, but they are still interested in knowing, you know. And this is also why podcast has become so popular. And the same thing with like info videos on YouTube or LinkedIn, because both YouTube and LinkedIn, they're search based. So YouTube is like a channel that people, of course, go to and ask like how to do something. So, of course, it's a very important way to target, because if you can do a very short info video on why somebody should support a project around climate something, then YouTube is a very good channel, because a lot of people are always there. And YouTube will always be a different type of channel than Facebook, for example, because and YouTube is also more personal, because people go there and do active searches. And the same way that like if they do it on Google, then they can get a YouTube as their main hit. So, I mean, talking about what you're already like, you know, maybe you already know this, I'm not familiar with how much you do, but going back to the fact that you can actually utilize the content is, I mean, this is a great example. It's called the content pyramid. So it's the same content, but different platforms. So you have something that is called long form piece of content. And the long form piece of content could be, you know, anything here. It could be a keynote, it could be a podcast, it can be a Q&A show, in this case for this marketing specialist. But in your case, it could be a project that you're working on, right? So you're working on a project like the ones that you, you know, bridging between Europe and other countries, or like Germany and other countries, in order to involve schools and municipalities to understand how they can, like, you know, help the climate issue. So this is a long form piece of content. From this long form piece of content, you can repurpose it into micro content. And micro content is basically short form pieces. So that could be everything that is like in this example. It's articles, it's memes, it's images, quotes, stories, mashups, remixes, rant, GIFs, etc. Anything that could make your long form content live on longer in a short form piece. And this is a very traditional model of what everybody, like of how content is now used. Because you use, for example, if it's, let's say if it's a TV show, right? So a TV show is airing on TV, but in order to promote this, they take the TV show and they create different snippets. So they create maybe a small snippet that is like a scene from the TV show, which is maybe 5 to 10 seconds. And they put that online. And that creates maybe attention. And then they create like a meme because it's a funny show, or there's some kind of line, and then they say like, oh, this is like typical this show. And then they keep on using this to promote the show. So, you know, it's everything. It's like the content can actually be spread out, because all of a sudden you can find yourself finding so many bits and pieces in your story that are interesting. And one day you can post an article about a subject that is a part of your project. Another day you can quote somebody from your department. Why is this person involved in the project? And another day you can do a GIF that has to do with something, you know, climate related and related to the project. And in all these moments, you constantly create attention, and you can revoke reaction, because if the content changes, then you also but you still tell the people to like, yeah, read more about the full project. And then maybe you link them to a website. So it's all part of this. In this case, like you can build a content pyramid out of it. So you start with like the pillar content, which is on top. You repurpose it into micro content, and then you do the distribution. And in this way, you can actually get so much more out of it, and you minimize your resources, because you don't have to have a lot of people doing this. You can actually just use the team that you have. It's just that you have to find and create a strategy. There's tons of ways to create social media strategies. If you're already using newsletters, and if you're using social media and all of that, that is really great. But one of the things that is really important, if you are already using it, is to actually learn something from it, and learning something from it, because a lot of people now, they say like, okay, so I'm just going to post on Facebook, and then they post the same type of things all the time, and then maybe they post a lot of text or whatever, and then they only look at the likes. And it's also about like, okay, but how do you change your communication, and creating and structuring your social media plans, and actually talking about how you want to communicate on all these platforms, and maybe also doing it on a monthly or a weekly or a monthly basis, can help you a lot, because then you can also understand. Here like Hootsuite, they have a lot of templates for social media. You probably already have templates, but I think that these kinds of tools can be very helpful if you don't have them, because it's all about finding a strategy. And even if social media is very even if all kinds of online media should be fast, they're not that fast, because you can plan everything in advance. So you can plan and you can schedule. And then of course, if stuff is changing in the world, like if the circumstances are different, then you can react, and you can, talk about that in that moment. But at the same time, the more you actually plan, and the more consistency you have in your social media planning, the better you can understand what the tone of voice is, how the community that you have, how they engage, and what kind of feedback you get. And this is like the most important thing when it comes to different types of topics that you want to discuss, or different types of people that you also want to reach out to. So for example, in Poland, I think when it comes to Spotify, you have access to a tool where you can also promote it. But nowadays, there's no way to actually promote the podcast on Spotify itself. Like they're starting to implement this now. So right now, the only way to promote podcasts on Spotify is to do it on other platforms. A lot of podcasters now, they started using audio snippets. So for example, doing certain teasers with audio so that you can, there's like different tools that you can use. So you have a little audio snippet so that you can give an insight, like a little insight into this. And also on Spotify now, if you go, if you find the podcast, you can also include a trailer. And the trailer now in the new interface on Spotify sits on top. And the trailer is, of course, a great way to promote the podcast for new people that are coming in. So, for example, if I find the WWF Poland Spotify episode and I find it in my phone and I want to see what they're going to talk about, and then I can listen to a little trailer. And then in the trailer, maybe it says like, oh, welcome to this WWF podcast. We are covering these and these topics. Tune in every Tuesday for a new episode. And then I can follow this. So all these kinds of like trailers and stuff like that, they have been enabled. And if you, of course, create a trailer for the podcast in itself, which is not that difficult, it's just when you do a recording, you just record a little trailer to it. It shouldn't be long, maybe max 10, 15 seconds. And then you can actually also use that to promote it on other channels, because you can also promote audio on Instagram. You can promote audio on Twitter. You can just use a picture in the background, and then it's a video. So when it comes to podcast, I think that's that. And you, Alexandra, you also asked about TikTok. I think that TikTok is very, it's kind of like it's a wave right now and everybody are doing TikTok, but there really needs to be a lot of strategy behind entering TikTok. And I think that doing a soft launch and trying to understand how you want to use TikTok is a good idea. Spending a lot of money before you actually understand if this is something that benefits your brand is not a good idea, because TikTok is mainly used right now by the younger audience. So of course, if you want to attract attention of a younger audience for WWF, for example, you can try to use TikTok, but usually TikTok is also decided by trends. So if somebody picks up something, it can blow up, but if somebody doesn't pick up anything, it can also be a waste of money. So it requires a lot of research and it requires a lot of tries to figure it out. We've had the same discussions at Spotify, and even as a very big brand, we've decided to learn more about the opportunities at TikTok before we just jump into something. Because following the trends is not always what is beneficial for your project or brand or business or whatever. It's better to just kind of think and then react. So Raluca, you asked me what I meant with the social media templates. Social media templates that are done just in a Google sheet, like Excel. And it's just to showcase how you can structure your social media communication. So if you use Facebook or if you use newsletters, you just create an Excel sheet where you can put in all the content. I don't think that LinkedIn actually reaches beyond professional circles. I mean, it reaches to the consumers. The professional people on LinkedIn are people, so of course they are also consumers. I think that it could be a very good way to use it in an educational point. I think a lot of people right there, like a lot of professionals as well, but as well as consumers, they go to LinkedIn to find news and like educations. LinkedIn also has a very big like education center where they have like little videos where you can learn a lot. They do a lot around white papers, and they do, you can create a lot of attention around free webinars. I think that LinkedIn can be very good. It all depends on what it is that you want to communicate and how you want and who you want to talk to. So it's hard for me to say. So Oliver, you always share picture video with them. I mean, I think that like it depends on the platform, but I think that videos, of course, always engage better. The video should be short, but I think that like I think in some cases a picture is also really good. I think that it just shouldn't be too much text, and it should always just be a strong headline together with like if you have an informative video, I think that it's important to share that. I think that it's important to take into consideration that a video shouldn't be longer than 30 seconds. If it's not like more of a proper video that could live on a platform and it's like a movie. But from like a infomercial point of view, it should not be a long video, because especially not online. You can do a little snippet of a video and then let people watch more on a different platform. But I think that it's very important here. It's how you tell the story. If you can create attention and revoke the reaction in a 15-second video, then that's the most important thing, because then you can get your message through. So I also want to continue and talk about pitches. So you probably heard the word pitch. So pitch is basically, a pitch actually comes from the movie industry. So a pitch is something that the film and TV industry used in like, back in the days even. They pitched an idea to a network. So it's basically that. After a while, the salespeople took it over and they called it a sales pitch. And a sales pitch was when you also pitched an idea to make money. Nowadays, we use pitches in startup connections. So if there's a startup, they always like pitch. They have a pitch deck, they have to pitch, and everything is about pitches. And after a while, we also got this elevator pitch that you probably heard of. So it's a pitch basically that you have to be able to pitch your business idea while riding an elevator. Nobody has defined if the elevator actually has like 100 floors and is located in New York, or it's like, you know, my elevator at my mom's house, which is like 2 floors. So this is not defined, but I would say that a pitch is sometimes they're of course longer depending on like the environment. But since we talk about pitches, I think that it's very important to use pitch as something that you can go back to, because in a pitch there's certain aspects that you need to ask yourself, and a pitch is also like you are kind of forced to think about how you would describe your project or your job or your current situation or whatever to somebody that doesn't know anything about it in around 30 seconds to 1 minute. And Warren Buffett, a businessman from the US, he always said that if you can explain your business in like, I think it was 10 seconds or something like that, or even less, if you can explain your business to a 6-year-old in around like let's say 10 to 30 seconds, and that 6-year-old will understand, then you have a good pitch. And it's funny to think about pitches in this correlation, because sometimes we forget that we have to figure out how to actually approach our projects. Like, how do we explain this? And sometimes when people ask, we just go like, oh yeah, and then it's this and that, and then blah, 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 and they maybe don't understand anything. Or we just say like, oh yeah, you know what, it's my job, you wouldn't understand. So we maybe don't talk to other people around it. But then in business perspective, like in business environments, we are faced with this, you know? So we're faced with trying to figure out how to sell this idea to somebody in a very fast way. So let's say that we talk to local media, right? And they ask you like, why should I write this story? And you are calling them on the phone, or you're writing an email, and you don't want to write an email, of course, that is like too overwhelming, but you also don't want to write an email with too little information. And if you attach something to this email, and if it's too long, they might not want to read it. So the question is, how do you approach these outlets? How do you approach, for example, local media, or even schools or municipalities or other types of businesses that you want to either collaborate with you, or you want attention from them for your project? And even in a case of with WWF in Poland, if you want to enter TikTok, you also need to understand, how do you describe your purpose on a channel like TikTok, So, and these are all pitches, because they're all kind of ideas, and how do we go about this? I selected 3 videos here, but I'm gonna let you watch them after the meeting, because it's just I would just explain to them a little bit. So the Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, he has a segment called 5-second summaries with different comedians and actors. So in this video, the actor needs to describe a movie to Jimmy Fallon, and he's supposed to guess it. And it's just very interesting that when you're put under pressure and you need to find a way, it's like playing charades, and you need to find a way to communicate something. But it's only when you put yourself under that pressure. And it's very important. That's why I think that to learn how to pitch, it's just a very good way to also learn how to simplify your job, or simplify the projects that you're working on. The other video is called 10 seconds education. So it's different videos that explain complex things in 10 seconds. So in this video, they explain Fahrenheit, Celsius, and Kelvin. So they basically do a little drawing, and they explain in 10 seconds why it's called like what's Fahrenheit, Celsius, Kelvin. And in the other video, it's actually The Wolf of Wall Street and Leonardo DiCaprio presenting like his sales strategy in this like very bad insurance company. So I think that it's like, that's why I think that pitching is actually a very good exercise for these kinds of things. And even sometimes when you need to actually just write a short description of something, you sometimes need to spend a lot of time in writing like a description. Let's say that you only have, yeah, like in Twitter, for example, you have like, now it's more, but you had like 160 characters. And all of a sudden with this 160 characters, people started to communicate. Back in the days when we had Nokias, the old cell phones, we also only had 160 characters. That's what Twitter used because they knew that everybody used that when they launched. So the question is like, sometimes I think that we also over communicate. So the question is, how do we simplify? And do we simplify with actually asking ourselves the right questions and forcing ourselves to create these kinds of pitches in order to create more attention with these, with people who don't know anything about our project. So in the end, it's a lot about selling, actually. So yeah, so do you have any questions? Because I'm actually coming to, okay, what do we have? Oh, that's a different, Kasia, if you could choose only one social media tool to get through with your messages, what would you choose? It's a very difficult question because I think nowadays you need to also look at who you're talking to. Like, where are these people? I don't think that there's no like right tool because if you have already a lot of followers on Facebook or something, you need to concentrate on that. I think that people also consume media in a different way right now. So I think that if we want to create attention, this is what we need to do. We cannot only choose one social media tool. We need to choose several, and we need to just like create a plan on how to optimize the content so that we can still operate on all these channels, but maybe some more than others. So if you already have a bigger following on Facebook, you focus on Facebook. But since they all kind of like go together, you know, you just put them together. So it's about learning, because one time, like if let's say that you at WWF in Poland, like let's say that you use Twitter, but you don't really understand Twitter, then maybe Twitter is not for you. And you shouldn't never force yourself to use something, because the people who are following you or reading you or whatever, they're there because they actually like what you're doing. And then they're not going to engage. And nowadays it's actually it's not about creating a lot of likes. It's not about like having tons and tons of followers on Instagram. It's actually about having a decent group of following, but having a very high engagement, because it's the engagement that shows that people actually read you and people engage in your story. So you also need to put yourself out there and even ask your audience online, like, what do you think? You know, is this good? If you have a newsletter, also leave it up to the reader. Please comment, or what do you think we should do? Like, online is a lot about creating a relationship and building a trust. It will take time, because it does take time, but that's why strategy is always really good. Keep the balance with your communication agenda during coronavirus. You know, like, I mean, I think that the coronavirus in general is very tricky, you know, because there's a lot going on, and now we can go back to this noise, you know. And I think that nowadays the one thing that is actually working the best for some people are all the like memes, because it's too much. But I think that always keeping an objective, I think that like keeping an whatever it is that you do, showing that you care and showing that you are like there, but not saying too much, is something that a brand can do. It could be about little things, you know, like changing your profile picture to stay at home, or just posting the most kind of like objective and relevant information, guidelines, you know, rules, and that that could be like the best in these kinds of times, because we have to leave like everything else like to the news outlets. But in your case, if you are really like, if you really know something and you back it up with sources and you really want to get a message through, do it in a very humble way, you know, with a lot of love, because people they don't want to be afraid. They need to be comforted.
Oh, could you give us a few tips on how to increase social media audience? Asked Reluca from Bankwatch Romania.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that increasing social media audience, like the best way to go about it is, of course, like, I mean, it is to put a little bit money behind it, because then you can also like analyze it and see. I think that I don't know the exact cases, like which channels you want to increase, but if you have a social media channel and you maybe have partners, it's always good to partner up with somebody if that partner already has a bigger following, in order to just kind of like gain a bigger momentum. So collaborations with like different types of, if it's like telling another institution to, oh, could you post about this so that we can maybe get more followers? I think that also creating a lot of like shareable content, or like actually encouraging people to follow you is a good way to see if it happens. And using your existing using what your existing like other platforms and stuff like that to highlight why people should follow you on Facebook. And sometimes you also, when you want to gain more social media followers, you also need to understand that like once they actually get there, you need to give them something, because some people just think that like maybe it's enough if I increase the followers, but then the channel doesn't do anything. So you have to have a strategy of what you're going to post all the time so that people actually can, you know, see it. And sometimes it's like, it's easier to say like, oh, I would want to gain more followers. But at the same time, if nothing is happening on a page, then you cannot really like, then there won't be anything else, because it won't even appear in the feed of the people that are following you. So there's different, like, it's very difficult to understand how to work this out. Of course, like Facebook especially just enables you to have these pages, but of course they want you to put money behind it in order to actually also gain more traction. That's how it is. So if you don't have, like, if you have limited resources, I think that partnering up with somebody and then also having a clear strategy of what you're doing on these platforms for the people that you have there, and how they can help you actually create awareness for your social media platform, that's the key. Because I've seen some pages, and like last year we had an example. It was a great initiative from France, and the girls did a great job with a website, and they wanted to reach out to like the people in, I don't know, in some cities in France, and they also had it translated into German. But it just, like, the text that they put in, they were too long. Nobody understood it. It was too complex. It was about some saving energy, and they did it in some buildings and blah, blah, blah. It was a very interesting topic, but there was no structure. So for a consumer that doesn't know so much about climate, or is not familiar with, like, you know, the language or the terms, or, you know, it's very difficult to understand why you should then follow a Facebook page. So I think that it's like simplifying the message and who you're talking to is one of the key ingredients, because it's easy for you to understand it, but you're not reaching you on like your Facebook because you're already there. If you want to educate other people to spread the message, then you need to also understand how you communicate to these people. Because like for me also, climate is a very important topic. I'm not a stupid person, but there's some things that I also don't understand. And I want it simplified to me so that I know that if somebody wants me to take action, they need to tell me how to do it, you know? So I think that that's kind of the case.
Yeah, Isabella, I think collaboration and network, especially with social media channels, are a very important, or is a very important topic for us, for the EUKI community, and that's why we offer to all of the projects and to all the communicators and to all of those organizations who have a profile on Twitter or on Facebook. We would like to share all of your news, and we should connect and collaborate under each other, so that we support us and that we spread our messages with all the power we have.
Yeah, exactly. I think that that's like, in times of these, I think that that's really important because it's so much, also it's so much more credible when you have partners, especially if not a lot of people know about you, or like, you know, they don't know too much. So I think that like collaborations is sometimes even better than like trying to spend some money on these platforms and seeing. But I think that just collaborations and understanding why you're doing it, because I think that sometimes it's also like nowadays, I mean, Facebook is also decreasing a lot. Not a lot of people uses Facebook anymore. Some of the people use Instagram much more. So it's also a question of like, where do you think that the people that you want to reach, or like even if it's government or whatever, maybe they are more active on Twitter. Maybe you have to communicate or collaborate with somebody and actually get their attention on Twitter. So it does take a little bit of thought process and research to figure it out. The good thing about Facebook is, of course, that they provide a lot of insights, much more insights than Instagram, because they are not sharing their insights. So, a lot of social media outlets, or like a lot of media outlets nowadays, they also started using what's it called, like WhatsApp. So they create, like, you can create certain groups on WhatsApp and you can get notifications and stuff like that. So there's a lot of things that there's so many channels that provide solutions right now, but the question always remains of like, what do you want to do with it and why do you want to use it? And I think that it's important to ask yourself that again and again. So I do have, I mean, me and Oliver, we talked a little bit before about this. So I do have, I prepared a task or like an assignment. And we said that, of course, like, you don't have to feel forced to do this, but it would be nice. So on my last slide, I prepared like a creative writing and presentation assignment. And this is mainly because it's, I provided some tools, and a lot of you, of course, like, you already have a lot of these channels in place. So maybe this could be an opportunity for you to think, maybe you're already doing this. I don't know. Maybe this is completely not useful. I also don't know. It's very difficult in these like webinars that you have to know exactly what all the people do. But I think that this would be something that would help me in a way. So like if I would attend a webinar like this. So I wanted you to actually choose a project that you know of or you're currently working on. Do some research on the project, or like select bits and pieces, including some pictures that you would need in order to create a presentation. Create a small presentation. It could be in PowerPoint, Google Slides, Word document, whatever. And you would like how you would inform people about this project on different online platforms and media channels. And then I want you to include the following. So a small content and communication plan that would include different online platforms and how the content will live on these platforms. And then please show examples with pictures and text for each selected platform. So this relates back to like story, to the content pyramid, also to the rule of 3. And then create a pitch description of your project that won't be longer than 60 seconds if you read it out loud. This would be a way to kind of like structure and see how you would actually pitch in a project, even in written form. And then develop a short timeline of your project and how you would communicate for up to 1 to 2 weeks. Let's say that you would want to do a social media plan how would you want to communicate this for 1 and 2 weeks? So for example, day 1, you start with communicating this on this platform. Day 2, you share this on that platform. Day 3, or like maybe you just want to share 2 times a week, whatever. If you want to do this, I don't know how busy you are. We also talked about this. I said up to 1 week. You're more than happy to email me. My email address is in there. You can also email me and ask questions about it. I can provide you feedback. We can set up a meeting. I would love to help out as much as I can, also on an individual basis, which is of course always like a little bit easier. I'm wrapping up my project at Spotify right now, so I have some more time on my hands. So if that is something that you would be interested in and you have some kind of like, we can talk about it in this presentation, yeah, and see if maybe that can help.
Yeah, thank you very much for your time. And well, if there are any last questions to Isabella, she could answer right now, that would be nice. Or if you can, as she already said, you can send her an email, or if you want to, you also can send an email to us, to the